Welcome to another episode of the Vocal Minority Report. It is your boy MC, representing Dallas. I love the Triple D. It's where I'm from. It's my city. Always been Dallas strong. Appreciate everyone downloading this show. As always, you could have downloaded any podcast in the world, but you're here with us. We appreciate that. We will be doing a show about the shootings and cops and cop shootings and everything that's happened here in the last 7 days specifically. And this episode is a special one because it's one that I wasn't going to put out. The audio quality I wasn't completely happy with, but it's one that I had with writer Shane Paul Neal. We recorded this at the beginning of June, so you'll hear some of the references are more timely to that. But the overall conversation, what we're talking about, Black Lives Matter, white people's response to Black Lives Matter, amongst some other issues. So I thought it was still important to get this episode out kind of as a placeholder until I can finish working on the other episode that will address both the Thursday shootings in Dallas as well as the events that prompted the protest. So enjoy this episode, and I'll talk to you after the show, and be on the lookout for our next episode this week.
Previously on the Vocal Minority.
Are you part of the silent majority? Or are you part of the vocal minority?
Well, fuck, let's go.
Attention, please.
If America can be saved, and I don't know if it's too late, but it'll be through radio shows like this new thing.
This shit here feels like the whole entire world collapse. Motherfucker!
The revolution will not be televised, will not be televised, will not be televised, will not be televised. The revolution will be no rerun, brothers.
It's the vocal minority.
The revolution will be live.
Let's welcome Mr. Shane Paul Neal to the Vocal Minority Report today. Shane is the founder of the Hudson Consultancy, a startup designed to help small businesses build their digital footprints. He's a contributor to the Huffington Post. He's also the director of partnerships for TWIB Media, that's This Week in Blackness, and one of my favorite writers and resources for podcasts, an all-around social media nerd, and I don't think he'll take offense to that. How's it going today, Shane?
I'm doing all right, man. Getting by. Happy that the summer's finally kicked in a little bit, even though it's a little chilly in Jersey today.
Let's get into this essay that you wrote entitled, Dear White People, I Don't Hate You. So first, let me tell you, when I looked at the title, I was like, man, is this clickbait? But then I read it and I was like, okay, well, no, this is a nice groundwork for a larger conversation on race, I guess questions regarding being queer, kind of et al., right? So first, let me ask you, what prompted you to write this open letter to white America, as you put it?
It's funny. It wasn't. It was only secondarily to white America. It was specifically to a single person. And it was a young lady who used to work for me back when I had my real estate office. And I think when she was working for me, she was about 21 or so. She lived uptown, Irish girl, redhead, like her family's like straight from Ireland, true Irish.
Okay.
But she was an uptown girl, so she hung out with the Spanish kids, the black kids, everything else, and cool people and everything else. But the essay was written, in the midst of, everything that's happened in Ferguson and Baltimore and everything else, Trayvon, all these different things. And I was, obviously pretty vocal with my posts and stuff, just with everything that was going on. And there wasn't anything, I don't think it was anything where I was necessarily condemning all of white America, but we understand there's a power structure in this country, and we understand who's at the top, who's at the bottom, and who's in between. And she, I guess at some point started taking offense to what I was saying. So she would challenge me here and there about some stuff I was doing or some stuff I was talking about. And we would go back and forth. And I think it got to a point where she realized that she couldn't work through and get around what I was saying just because I was coming from a place of truth.
Right.
And also, and not to be that way, because I feel like there are a lot of younger people who are far smarter than I am. But I'm 14 years older than you, and I have a deeper reach of my own personal history to reflect on and to relay back to what I'm writing. she wasn't in a space where she's going to be able to challenge me on what I was talking about. So she got frustrated, and she ended up sending me a message on my board that said, not all white people are bad. And my response was, I agree with you. I don't think white people are bad at all. But I also said, I find it interesting that you're coming at me about the goodness of white people.
Right.
In the midst of everything I'm talking about for the suffering of people of color, queer folks. And just for record, I'm a straight cis man, but I threw queer in as well. It's been part of the conversation as well. And
right.
So I'm kind of running through a lot of it because sexuality is the new civil rights at this point. I think that's pretty clear. We went through the gay and lesbian. Now it's trans. Who knows what it'll be next week? So we're running through this whole course of everything. So I put that in there as well. And as I was writing, I realized she had unfriended me, which bothered me because when you make your statement and then walk out the door, there's something kind of disrespectful about that to me.
Right.
If you engage me in conversation, It was like, even if she said, hey, listen, I'm no way getting a conversation with you. I'm listening to what you're saying, but I need you to understand that all white people are bad, but I can't deal with you anymore. I would have expected that more, but it was like she dropped the mic and ran out the door. So it prompted me to ultimately write the essay.
Okay, so you touched on a lot of things in that response that I wanted to get on. One being, you mentioned the age of the young lady. So how much do you think, and obviously the age difference, how much do you think that comes into play in the overall reception to your post? So her age, let's talk about specifically, how much do you think that comes into play in her comments or her reaction towards you?
I think it played a pretty key role, just because I know when I was 21, 22, you're at that age, and I'm not going to say that you think that you knew everything, but what you believe very strongly.
Correct.
I also think her background played a big role in it because to be and again, it's conjecture, I'm not a white person. I can imagine to be a white person who's grown up around people of color your entire life. And then so then you're in the midst of this struggle, basically, where you realize it's essentially people of color trying to work through the power structure of white America. And you kind of realize as much as you've been a part of this group and associated with this group, you're not them. So as much as you may feel the struggle, whatever else, you have to now identify with the fact that you are in some ways part of the power base. And even if you're not participating or doing things to regulate or interfere with the lives of people of color, you're still part of that group.
Right.
So I think there was some age stuff there, but also I think there was an identity issue because of who she identified with versus who she actually was.
I'm glad I'm glad that you mentioned that because that's a pretty interesting dynamic there where you mentioned her ability and her relevance to and ability to relate to, let's say, people of color, more urban, in air quotes, probably lifestyle, but and maybe even, economically, socially, whatever, but then not realizing the true that being white, that white supremacy, which, sometimes people, well, obviously that has a terrible connotation, historically, as it should. But when you take it on its true surface, when you think about, racism, what racism truly is, and then you think about white supremacy and the fact that your skin tone is white, that privilege, no matter what you experience in your normal day to day or your upbringing, you think you didn't, obviously as you progress in life, it becomes more evident as things change. So I think that's what you're saying there, that, her identity crisis her specifically, and I think that's probably true of a lot of folks, where that identity crisis and we talk about class an awful lot on this show too, where from culture, you think you're not that far apart. And so when someone points out those differences to you in light of all the negativity that can probably weigh on you, and when you don't have those life experiences to fully be able to digest that, it probably does lead for you to shut down and, as you said, drop the mic. So is that what you feel happened there?
Yeah, and I think that's what a lot of it came down to, because I think for her, she's looking at the fact that, well, I'm not doing these things. I'm not participating in things. That's not who I am. And I think she kind of felt like she was getting covered under this blanket that didn't apply to her. But I use the to be analogous, I talk about, being a man and being somebody who's probably had more female friends than male friends in my life. I'm very much pro-woman. I'm getting comfortable with the idea of considering myself a feminist, even though I haven't fully claimed it yet. And that's only because I feel like I need to learn more about feminism before I claim it. So it's more of a knowledge thing than where my heart is.
Hey, we'll make sure you check out our episode 109 with noted activist and journalist Ijeoma Olowu. I even got her name right there, where we talked about bell hooks and feminism and black feminism. So you and everybody else should check that one out. So that's a shameless plug, but
no, man, get it when you can.
Right. but in all seriousness though, because I like you, and not to cut you off here, I'll let you get back into your thought, but I've got 2 daughters, right? So I certainly would have never, ever, I knew that I did not want to be a chauvinist, and I thought that I was progressive in my thinking. Just, I have a little sister, love my mother, respect my mother, the things that you're supposed to do, right? But then in having 2 daughters and realizing how the world is slanted more towards, males, and how, how women are portrayed, and how I need to instill this certain level of confidence and into my daughters. And I don't know if that's really feminism. We kind of touched the scratch the surface in that episode I mentioned. But so anyway, so I say all that to say, yeah, I like hearing your mind that you might be striving to be one, and you're going to do more research until you get there. So that's good to know, I guess.
Sure. I mean, and the reason I even brought it up was it goes back to understanding the power you have. Like there's a lot of talking now about intersectionality and knowing what part of your makeup, whether it's gender, sexuality, all these different things, what part of it brings you a certain amount of power and what part may cost you some power, so to speak. But as a man, when a woman says that, street harassment is real, or that sexual assault on college campuses are real, or that the microaggressions of being a woman and all these things exist, because I'm not in that space, I'm not in a space to say that these things don't happen.
Right.
So when a woman tells me X, Y, and Z is going on, I, as a man, have to say, okay, that's happening. Even if I'm not participating in consciously, at least, or, if I'm not fully aware because I'm not in that space, I can't deny it. So all I can do is take that information, learn from it, and try to make sure make sure that I'm not participating in subjugating anybody based on whatever power structures I have with me. But that's a hard lesson to learn, because it by default says that you have privilege, and everybody wants privilege until they have to admit they have privilege. And I think that's part of what happens here, is that you have to realize, like, privilege, you don't have to be ashamed of having privilege, but you have to acknowledge that the privilege exists. Even in terms of colorism, I'm a light-skinned black man. I know that affords me some things. Doesn't afford me a whole lot, doesn't afford me everything, but it affords me more than my darker-skinned brothers or darker-skinned women or whoever else in the country. There are certain benefits that come. So if I pretend that doesn't exist, even if I'm not actively trying to partake in it, I know that by default, some of that comes my way.
Right,
so
because
as a young white woman had to realize, like, I'm not actively doing anything to anybody, but I'm in a station where I'm always going to be better off because of this thing that I have no control over.
Right. And to counter that, I mean, we people of color are in the place that we're always going to have that burden that we have no control over, despite our circumstances, good or bad. So yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, that's very astute, actually. So she unfriended you, right? So, and obviously in this day and age, that's one of those things that every time I lose a social media follower, like on Twitter, which hopefully doesn't happen often, but I might, or maybe we made somebody angry, I look at it and I see it. So anyway, that's just a day and age we live in. That's a, way folks can voice their displeasure, as you said, drop the mic and just leave the conversation. But I wanted to ask you, so she unfriended you. Isn't that a lot of black folks' fear, right? That if we speak our minds fully to white people, that they'll shut us out of their world more. Not that we're necessarily, worried about that or living like in a world that we can't say what we want to say, but even either subconsciously or consciously, there might be the attitude that we speak freely. We're going to piss off, cause someone to shut down, which could be problematic, depending on the situation.
It's funny. I've seen more and more, I think, tweets and notes about sort of the Black fatigue of quote unquote behaving or softening the blow for the sake of understanding.
Right.
And I get it. I think there are times where those things have to happen just so you can afford the opportunity for teaching moments. But I think that comes with, it depends on your relationship that you have with a certain person. But in general, yeah, we do find ourselves in a space where we have to soften the message and placate a little bit to be heard. And more I'm just seeing where a lot of Black folks, a lot of people of color are just tired of it. And not just people of color. I think across the board, if you're subjugated in this country in any kind of way, the idea that you have to make your message and make your pain palatable to be heard and understood, it wears down on folks. And it's funny because we were talking a little bit about Ali off air.
Right.
And that was the thing that really, as much as people are saying how great he was and he was an American hero, that was the reason he was hated in the 60s and 70s. Like this idea that, he was this American icon and everything else. He became that, but that's not where he was birthed from. He was birthed
right,
from the fact that he pissed off a lot of folks.
Right.
And it's because he didn't care about that space, about that as much.
Yeah,
but,
I mean, I watched him. I watched him read this white woman about
the English woman.
Yeah, exactly. In the green shirt, exactly. Yes, yeah. He read her so clean, and then the college campus where he read them about not going to Vietnam, and all you white boys are can't wait to go to college, so you don't have to go to Vietnam, and y'all, so and everyone and everyone knows those. Hopefully, everyone knows those famous clips. But yeah, exactly. I know what you're talking about.
But even then, for Ali, and as much as I appreciate Ali for doing that, he had the advantage of being heavyweight champion of the world. He had the advantage of being world famous and rich. So he didn't have to worry about what people thought of him as much.
Right.
For me, who does stuff for HuffPo and actually just wrote my first piece for NBC Black about Ali.
Yeah, congratulations, by the way. Yeah,
thank you, man. I was really happy about that one. And funny enough, as soon as I wrote it, the comments were immediately about how fucked up Ali was and blah blah blah, which kind of proving my point.
Exactly.
But, yeah, it's one of those things where he was afforded the opportunity to do that because of the space that he was. For you to have the podcast that you have and talk about what you talk about, for me to write about in public spaces what I write about, and still with them saying like I'm not rich, I'm not famous. There is a risk that comes with that, and that's why I'm amazed at the folks who are out there actually doing a lot of the work that they're doing, whether it's on the streets and protesting and doing everything they've been doing for the last few years, especially. It takes a certain amount of nerve and resolve to say, I know that this may cost me X amount of dollars. This may cost me my career. This may cost me my reputation, but I don't care.
Right.
Like the little bit that I've managed to do with my little bit of writing that people have enjoyed, I appreciate it, but it's nowhere near what a lot of the folks are doing. So I just want to, kind of get that out there for sure.
No, of course. And that leads to the next point I wanted to bring up two things really. You state some very obvious points, not all white people are bad and not all people of color are good. I think that kind of goes without saying, but that's one of those things that you've got to, you got to put that disclaimer #message just to, as we discussed maybe a minute ago, to soften the blow, to overstate the obvious. And then you also say that being pro-minority is not being anti-white. And I think that's really powerful. The name of this show, The Vocal Minority, and, that's whatever, man, that's a nice little wordplay. But at the end of the day, though, I think that's real important to speak on that. One can exist, the two are mutually exclusive, so I want to see if you can speak more on that.
Sure. I mean, I grew up in the South Bronx in the 80s and 90s.
South Bronx, South Bronx. Go ahead, my bad.
So at that point, my only access to white people were people in positions of power, teachers, police officers, blah, blah, blah. I didn't make my first true white friend until I was maybe 26, and he ended up being like one of my best friends in the world. He Like if anything happened to me tomorrow, this man might raise my son. Like put it you that way.
Okay.
But this was something that happened,
This must be a cool white dude.
No, he's an amazing.
I'm being funny.
Yeah. Shout out to Jonathan Cain. But yeah, it's one of those spaces where
I talked over you. Say his name again.
No, I was saying shout out to Jonathan Cain. I love that dude. But it was one of those situations where I was, for lack of a better phrase, I was introduced to white people as, I would say, equals.
Okay.
Later than I think a lot of folks who grew up in more diverse communities.
Yeah, because if you didn't start hanging out with a white boy until you were 26, yeah, I grew up in the burbs, so about we weren't best friends, but we were definitely. I was cool with John Paul and Zach, and I'm not making up those names. Those aren't just stereotypical names. My friends were John Paul and Zach. So yeah.
And for those of you who have never been to New York or don't live in New York, do not let me understate this. New York is probably one of the most segregated cities in the country.
Okay.
In terms of just red light, like if you're on the train, you know exactly what stop the last white person is going to get off at.
Wow.
Because anything past a certain point is basically Spanish or black or whatever the case may be. So when I say I didn't know white people until I was a grown man in New York, that's a real thing. And a lot of folks from New York will tell you the exact same thing. All that to say that as I've been around more white people as an adult, the idea that not all white people are bad has been necessary to state, only because everybody at their heart wants to be considered a good person.
Right.
No, you take the worst person that you can think of. You take Donald Trump. You take whoever. They go to bed at night feeling like they're doing good work and that they're a good person.
Yeah, I don't know about Donald J. Trump, but I got your point.
Sure, I'm not saying he is a good person. He thinks he's a good person.
Right. No, I got you.
So the confrontation. So the conversation about when you say white people or the power structure of white America has created issues and problems, blah blah blah. It goes back again to this idea of, well, not me. Right. And and that part has to be said because some things are bigger than you. I'm not talking about you directly. I think one of my favorite lines in movies came from Men in Black, and it's like the beginning of the movie where Will's trying to decide if he's going to join MIB or not and everything else. And he says, well, people are smart. They should know the truth. They should understand that they're aliens on a planet. And Kay says to him, a person is smart. People are dumb. People are nervous. People are erratic. You take a group of people, and it's a very different dynamic than dealing with one individual person. Right. So while that one individual white person may be cool as hell, as a whole, there's a lot of problems and a lot of issues. And I think that's the part that I think people have a hard time translating and dealing with and understanding like they're a part of this bigger piece. And that bigger piece can be problematic in a lot of areas, or they have benefited vastly from subjugating others throughout history. But again, looking at this young lady who says, I didn't do that. I'm cool as shit. She was. But that wasn't who I was talking to, and that wasn't what I was talking about as a whole.
Right. It's kind of like that, thou doth protest too much. It's like, nobody's talking to you, like just read the comment and take it for what it is. If it doesn't apply, it doesn't apply, But that's that. Well, that's a whole nother show. But the white guilt, in my opinion, that's some folks suffer from that white guilt and don't know how to deal with that when the light is shown on the topic in general. There might be a little something that touches a nerve. So yeah, but that's that's everyone's own internal struggle. That
sure, because it's not just white guilt. It's the same as if you're talking about street harassment. There are a lot of guys who say I say hello to women in the street. It's not because I'm trying to harass them. I'm just saying hello and being pleasant. Good for you. But the vast majority of men who are saying hello to women in the street, or not vast majority, but a large segment of men who are saying hello to women in the street are doing so for harassment and sexual reasons and things other than just being polite. And my mother's from Louisiana, so I was taught a lot of things that in terms of chivalry and all this and politeness and everything else. I don't speak to women in the street anymore because as polite as I think I'm being, she doesn't know me. So my politeness can come off as a threat. It can come off as this thing. But that's not me. But it doesn't matter if it's me or not. My question at the end of the day has to be, if I care about women, then I have to deal with women where they are, and I have to make sure they're comfortable. And even if that means I have to sacrifice a little bit of what I'm used to doing or what I would want to do, then it's worth it. I think for white people who are cool with people of color, who are down for people of color, have to recognize the same thing. It's not so much about you as an individual and your comfort and what your meaning is. It's about what that means to the person standing across from you. It's the same way where, America is a very patriotic country, and we're taught, wave your flag, wear your paraphernalia, go USA. But for people of color, especially depending on where you are, a lot of times that American flag feels like a substitute for a Confederate flag or something else. It's a warning sign. So there are different triggers for different people. And it doesn't necessarily mean because you have a flag in your window or on your car, that's who you are. But it's a trigger because white patriotism tends to come at the cost of the comfort of people of color.
Exactly. I mean, isn't that the whole "Make America Great Again" movement? I mean,
but great for who?
Right. Yeah. Right. And why is it so bad? And how did it get that way? Because if it was good, prior to 2008, and just in the last 8 years, it's kind of gotten shitty. Then, I wonder, it must be that Hawaiian Kenyan in the office that who caused the issue. So, but yeah, no, but no, that's very true. Man, there's just there's so many larger issues that all of this hits, and that's why I thought the article was so important, or essay piece, whatever, because it just highlights an experience that happens every day, especially when it comes to social media, because if that is the medium by which, like I told you the other day, I've only been on Facebook active for like the last 6 weeks. And I'm like, man, it's a different place out here. And the articles and rhetoric and vitriol and everything that, happens there, and the true feelings of folks that really come out, it's kind of amazing to me. So,
Facebook is where you go to find out how many awful people you actually know.
Well, right. Well, exactly. You know what? Because it used to be, for me, it was talk radio. Like I would listen to, Rush Limbaugh, Mark Levin, and back when Hannity, he probably still has his radio show. But anyway, I would listen to them, and I thought I was getting a real idea of, okay, this is how a lot of people really think, because I'm hearing this dynamic. And I call those Trump voters now, right? But now you go to Facebook, and then it was, comments on news stories, in the papers. But, a lot of organizations have shut down the comment section or regulate those now, or you have to, be an actual person. But now Facebook, though, it's just folks think they're only communicating to their friends, air quotes, and yeah, man, they'll get on there and and we'll let it all hang out. Like you said, you find out, how what your friends really think about things. So much so that they'll unfriend you for an innocuous statement or a statement that is true. So yeah, no, it's a very interesting and interesting place. But I think it might be the best microcosm of what we're really dealing with here, society, and a lot of that negativity. We did a show last week. I don't know if you listened to the podcast Serial or not.
I listened to the first season. The second one I was not thrilled with.
Okay, yeah, nor was I. The story of Bo Bergdahl and
yeah. So the part of interest in the first season was a story that you hadn't really heard and that hadn't been brought to light. So you got to go week to week with the story and kind of follow along. Bo Bergdahl, we pretty much got laid out, for a year and change, every nook and cranny. So it felt more like a recap than an exploration. So it just didn't work for me on the whole.
Right. Yeah. No, that's exactly right. So I bring that up just to say, last week we had on Asia McClain, the alibi witness from season 1 of Serial. We had her on for almost a couple of hours talking about her story and role in the case. And the reason I bring that up in the context of this conversation is talking about social media and just the treatment of her as a person, and in the comments that I was receiving for having her on the show, and I guess being what's considered a sympathizer for both her and Adnan was a little different because I haven't had that experience as of yet of having, a whole lot of negativity, for the show or for the guest and until having her on there, because having, a polarizing figure. So I say all that to say that these people are using, their names, their first names, their personal Twitters or Facebook accounts and saying some pretty shitty stuff. And I'm like, wow, okay. Like, you do realize that this is a case about folks that do not involve you at all, right? So I don't know what the what the issue is, but anyway, that's a side road. I digress a little bit. So
no, and it's funny, even as you bring that up, if you look me up on social media, whether it's my Facebook, Twitter, or else, it's all Shane Paul Neal.
Okay.
And the reason I did that, the reason I never used a username, real username, or anything else, is because I knew that anonymity allows you to say things that, in the real world you wouldn't say. So I use my legal name to kind of claim responsibility for everything that I say. So whether I'm right or wrong, what else, Shane said it. Right. And if I get proven wrong, if somebody corrects me, that's fine. But it keeps me correct, so to speak. So I can't just, be random egg, say random stuff because I'm behind this wall.
Right.
If I apply for a job tomorrow and they check my social media, well, you said X, Y, and Z. Yes, I did. And we can go from there. So I've always been about, just transparency in social media. I think I'm one of the few who well, not few, but a lot of folks prefer to, to use usernames and stuff like that. But I've always used my own government just to keep myself kind of falling into that lane of just saying, wildness whenever I felt like it.
Right. Yeah. And that, I think that's commendable. I mean, that's how it should be. Where if you're going to if these are your personal views, then you should be,
should own it.
Yeah. That's if you're going to put them out there, but I think the unmitigated gall, as my father would say, of people to use their government names and not have any regard for what that content, that may put out, vitriol, I think might be a good word to describe it. But I think and that might be part of the problem here, the sort of the emboldened nature and the times where it might be a little more okay for folks to say what they want to say, no matter how negative it is, and then might even defend it. And I'm just kind of spitballing here, but might even defend it because you, as a black man, can write an article or essay like this, or put your Facebook post and use Black Lives Matter, or call people out. And if you have the ability and it's okay for you to do that, I hear that argument a lot of times from folks that, well, why can't they, right?
No, you have the full right to be as loud as you want to be. It doesn't necessarily make you right.
Exactly, right.
But I think it's also, again, it goes back to, you can be as loud as you want to be, but be responsible for what you're being loud about.
Right.
And we all grow. Again, even talking about, this young lady. I'm 38 now. By the time she's 38, she may look back. I was like, oh yeah, I might have overreacted. I might have went sideways in that way I didn't need to. Because regardless of our interaction or how things ended, I don't think she's a bad person. I think she's a lovely woman from what I remember, what I knew of her. It was just this one interaction kind of spawned a larger conversation for me. So, if I bumped into her tomorrow, it's like, well, fuck you. But like, I'm not going to do that.
Right.
We either have the conversation about what happened, or if you don't want to, we don't have to. But I don't think, at the end of it, I don't think she has anything against black people or people of color in general or any of those other things. I know way better than that. Yeah,
and it probably just boils down to her friend or her supposed friend hurt her feelings at the end of the day. Like, that it may just be as simple as that. So sometimes, ultimately, you may have just hurt her feelings, especially if she thought she was down or whatever. So, and the conversation, luckily, is larger than her, which obviously your piece is much larger than her. And that interaction, that was just the catalyst, I believe, to bring up, which is a larger point, which I think we've discussed a lot of those merits. So, but throughout the piece, though, there was two different paragraphs I wanted to highlight, one of which I'll read now, and I'll pick it up here. You said, I have watched as my non-cis and non-hetero friends have been dragged physically and emotionally while being made to justify their right to be treated with the humanity and respect they rightly deserve. Similarly, the consequences of the pursuit of these rights have resulted in needless death. And Okay, so that's twofold, and I want to ask you a couple things about that paragraph there. One is, what the hell does non-cis mean? You mentioned it earlier in the conversation, and I had it down to ask you prior to, and I apologize to the audience and yourself for not being as enlightened, but I know what non-hetero means, but what does non-cis mean?
So first of all, don't apologize because these are terms that I'm still learning.
Okay, good. All right.
And I actively use them just to make them a part of my vocabulary and to kind of pick up from there. To be cis just simply means that you identify with the gender that you were born with. So that goes into sort of the trans community. So if you're trans, you either, you're born a male, but you feel like you should be a female or vice versa. That's basically what a non-cis person is. Non-cis is essentially a fancy word for trans, because cis folks identify with the gender they were born with.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So this might be another conversation. So cis, is cis an abbreviation for something, or do I need to just look that up on my own to see what? I know you're not the expert on it. I like to piece things together, but I got you. Okay.
I'm having one of those blackout moments where I forget the full word.
It's all good. I can Google it now and cut out the pause while I look it up, or I can just ask our audience.
I'm hitting the Google machine now. But it's like cisgender is basically the full word.
Okay.
Yeah, and again, I'm learning and I'm evolving myself. So if anybody's listening, this is the effort of learning and remembering.
And here it is. Okay, so cisgender is denoting or relating to a person whose self-identity conforms with the gender that corresponds to their biological sex, not transgender. Okay, so that's what you said. So someone who is not transgender is cisgender. So non-cis means someone who is transgender. All right. Seems complicated, but it makes sense. I
could have just as easily said trans. I don't know why I didn't. I was having a moment.
Well, you know how you educated, not light-skinned Negroes are. You got to let everybody know how smart you are.
Talking to a college dropout, but anyway.
Okay, well, yeah, okay, it's cool. All right, well, see, that's my own bias against light skin. I'll let it go. I apologize, but anyway, no, but so all right, but no, well, we've all been educated on non-cis, because I was going to say that, man, I just, the average person is just getting used to transgender, so a new phrase or new term, I knew we needed a little help there, but all right, I think everybody at least knows what that means now. And then, yeah, so the other part of that, though, similarly, the consequences of the pursuit of these rights have resulted in needless death, which, highlights your earlier point, how this is the new civil rights movement, essentially, when it comes to race and equality. So I grimace sometimes when I hear that, just because the age old,
versus like the black civil rights versus the civil rights in terms of sexuality and that kind of thing in comparison.
Right. But I do believe that everyone deserves to be treated fairly. So I've never had a problem with gay marriage or whatever from the standpoint of rights are rights. So you should be afforded the same rights. So I've never had an issue with that. So in this regard,
and I think what happens with that is we conflate civil rights with the civil rights era, and they do stand on their own. The civil rights era was what it was, but in terms of trans and LGBT and the rest,
you mean non-cis?
Yeah, exactly. They are also working to claim their civil rights and their civil liberties as well. So that you can stand as separate eras, because they aren't apples and apples. There are differences, and I know some folks like to say, well, the civil rights struggles that are happening now, standing on the shoulders of the past. That may or may not be true. I prefer to just keep them, with their own merits and everything else, and not say, well, you owe somebody else because they did this first. America is one where there's always been a lower class doing the same struggle. It was the Irish, it was the Italians, and all the way through Asian. Everybody's had this space. I think the biggest difference, obviously, is that
Go. I'm sorry.
No, see, the biggest difference, obviously, is that the level of subjugation of Black people or people of color in America is a little bit different because you do have the residual effects of slavery and everything else that came from then on since the founding of America. But it doesn't necessarily mean that people of color or Black people own the word civil rights or that it's exclusively theirs. It's a thing that transfers to whomever's fighting for their liberties.
No, I agree. There's no exclusivity when it comes to civil rights. And then to your point, as far as like parallel struggles, women's suffrage, versus, civil rights, the early, advancement, it's all, they've all gone parallel because, the white patriarchal dynamic has always existed. So obviously there's going to be groups that are going to struggle against that. So there's going to be some overlap because there's a lot of minorities when it comes to, those of us that don't fit in that major, white patriarchal dynamic. So, I got you. Okay. So another thing I wanted to highlight from your article was this statement here where you said that I'm not an activist. I saw activism firsthand last week as two presidential candidates were made to acknowledge and discuss the need for the protection of people of color and the queer community. So that just goes a bit more on what we're talking about, but I kind of wanted you to speak some more on that specific statement about activism. And I guess to clarify that statement for me, when you're talking about the presidential candidates and the discussion. So you must mean.
Actually, no, it predates Hillary a little bit. And actually, to be perfectly honest, I need to edit this because it wasn't even a queer issue. So last year, I was working the Netroots convention with TWIB Media. And Netroots is basically a convention of liberal organizations that kind of get together, talk about their different struggles, talk about different things that go in the country, X, Y, and Z. And it was Bernie, and he was the mayor in Baltimore. His name slips my mind right now. He was presidential candidate early on. Yeah, actually, it wasn't even Hillary. It was Martin O'Malley and Bernie Sanders.
Okay.
They both made appearances at the town hall at Netroots, and Black Lives Matter protest basically kicked off there. And in the midst of the conversations and everything else, Martin O'Malley made the slip up of saying all lives matter, which became his own thing. Bernie was dismissive, as I feel like he's tended to be with some of the race stuff. If it's not economics, Bernie doesn't care, and everything comes back to economics.
Right.
With him, but
imagine that.
So I was watching this protest happen. And it was organized, and it was well thought out, and it was vocal, and it was active. And there were people who were completely pissed off and booing. There were other folks that were completely about it and singing and chanting with the activists and everything else. But all I have to say is, like, when I say I've seen activism, I have seen what that is. I'm just a guy saying words.
Right.
And I'm very clear about that. So I just want to make that distinction. Like, I'm not trying to inflate myself to be anything more than I am. And I think there are some writers that do that, and I won't name names, but there are some writers that kind of do that.
Well, you can only come on the show if you name names, Shane.
I'm not going to do it. I'll let you name them.
I got you. I'll give you a list, and you just nod your head.
I'm still making my way in this world.
I got you. All right, we're good.
But I don't claim to be an activist. I'm just somebody who happens to have opinions, and I'm fortunate enough that there are some people who are interested in my opinions, and I just leave it at that. But there's work being done that doesn't. I'm an observer like everybody else. I just happen to be an observer who says stuff.
Right. Yeah. No. And that's what we need. I mean, that is the role of media and journalism, is it not? To say what needs to be said, to shine a light on the greater community. At least that's what I feel. I don't know any, solid doctrine on that, but I mean, if people like yourself aren't opinionated, I mean, an op-ed piece is important. An essay is important. Anything that is published that will reach a larger audience is important, especially one that is not confined by the traditional media, that operates independently as you do, even, in your operation with, HuffPo or, that's still relatively, autonomous is my understanding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, with HuffPo, it's interesting because it's literally like I'll write what I write. I'll hand it over to them, and either they publish it or they don't. They don't do any editing to do anything like that. My piece with NBC Black, I'm looking forward to doing some more stuff with them. There is an editor there, but even she is more just helping just to refine the message. She's not changing the message. So it's still a very different vibe than a lot of media where it is crafting a specific narrative with a specific reason that fits, whatever they're doing, whether CNN, MSNBC, everybody kind of has their agenda now and then their thing, and their news is crafted to fit that thing.
Right. I got you. Yeah. I mean, they said there's always an agenda. So, all right. Well, shout out to independent media, like what you're able to do and what we're able to do here. All right. So 2 more things I want to get on. One is you just touched on, which was Black Lives Matter, right? And so you say this, Black Lives Matter isn't set to discount the lives of others, but instead it serves as a reminder that ours do as well. And there's really nothing more to say on that. Maybe, I mean, you can expound on it if you'd like, but I just like to bring that up because I think it's extremely important that when we talk about Black Lives Matter, it's not necessary to include all lives matter, or because that, as most of us know, goes without saying. The point is that we have to highlight those of which that concern was not shown to. So if you want to expound on that further, then cool. But yeah, I just want to make sure we get that out there as well.
No, yeah, I think it's pretty straightforward, and it goes again, and even as we talk about the piece, I think as much as it is about black and white, it really is about privilege. So any space where you have a certain privilege, your privilege doesn't have to be acknowledged as mattering because it's privilege is automatic. So you have to look at, okay, I have this privilege. The people who don't have the privilege I have, they still matter as well. And it's about, evening things out just a little bit even. And that can happen just by acknowledging that you have this standing that's been helpful.
Lastly, we'll wrap it up with this, that you seem like me to kind of relish in making folks uncomfortable sometimes and have that opinion of kind of sorry, not sorry, right? Is that a good way to put it? Can you articulate that in a better way so I kind of feel better about my ways?
I've always said that, and I'm a drinker. I enjoy my various liquors and beers.
Okay, well,
I've always said that if I go to a bar and it's kind of clear that folks don't really want me there, I'm settling right in. I'm gonna hang out. I'm gonna stay a little bit longer. I'm gonna get one more drink, just because you need to understand that I have a right to the stool, just like you have a right to your stool and everything else. So there's a part of me that is fine with being uncomfortable because there's no growth in comfort.
Okay.
Whatever growth I've had over the years has come at some consternation. It's come at different things. I've relationships or whatever it is. If you're with somebody, you're not the same person that you were a year ago, 5 years ago. You had your arguments, you had your stuff, and at some point you were made to change, and change is uncomfortable. If you ever worked out, you don't go to the gym, leave and you didn't sweat and everything felt hunky-dory. Getting healthy means you're going to be uncomfortable. You're going to feel some pain. And I think the same thing is required here. And I think that's also the frustration of what we talked about earlier about the idea of Black folks having to soften their message to get the point across.
Right.
Because softening the message delays the progress.
Of course.
It delays the transition. If I'm angry, you need to know that I'm angry because then you can respond accordingly, as opposed to I'm miffed. If I'm miffed, you can ignore that.
Right.
If I'm a little annoyed, you're like, well, you need to deal with that.
Right. You'll get over that. Right.
If I'm angry, if I'm scared, if those things exist, I mean, I have a son. He's 3 years old now, and I watched the church shooting last year, and with Dylan Roof and everything else.
In South Carolina, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and between that and Freddie Gray and everything else, and I think and whether you have sons or daughters, just to be clear, because clearly we have the Sandra Blands and all the other women who have faced the same issues.
Right.
As a parent, of a black parent of a black child, I should not be worried about if I'm going to be around to raise them their entire lives, or if they're going to be around for me to raise them. There's this double-edged fear that comes that, something may happen to me just as easily as can happen to him. He could be Trayvon just as easily as anything else.
Right.
And that is a fear that, especially through the course of the last year, has hit me really, really hard. But translating that fear and the rage that comes from that fear, if I punch you in the gut, you realize I punched you in the gut. And then you respond, either you hit me back or you ask why I punched you in the gut. If I pinch you, you say, stop fucking pinching me, and you go on about your day.
Right.
So to some degree, there has to be some pain, there has to be some discomfort in order for anybody to progress.
Pain equals progression. I like that. I think that's a good note to wrap it up on. I appreciate your time this afternoon, or this evening, I should say. Thanks
for having me.
Ain't no problem, man. I hope to have you back on. I know your topics cover a wide range from tech to sports to media to social media. I know you're well rounded, and I think you probably get into some of the more nerdy aspects of some stuff too, and you don't take that as an insult. So
no, not at all. No.
So yeah. So we'll definitely get back up with you. Say again how folks can follow you. I know, and get a hold of you.
So Twitter is Shane Paul Neal. Instagram is Shane Paul Neal. Facebook, you can find me at SPN Rights. Those are the main ones. The website is ShanePaulNeal.com. I have a bunch of stuff on HuffPo. I just had my first piece published on NBC Black about my thoughts and feelings on the passing of Muhammad Ali. So please check that out. And for the folks listening, support independent media, support all these podcasts. It's clearly where the voice of the people is coming from at this point. Mainstream media is great for the weather. If you want to find out what's really going on in the world, pick up a podcast and rock out like that.
Hey, no doubt, man. That is a good way to end the show. So appreciate it. We will holler at you next time. And thanks again for your time, man.
Hey, man. Happy to do it.
All right, man. Peace. Hey, thanks so much for listening to this episode. Hope you enjoyed our conversation with Shane Paul Neal. Make sure you check him out. He's got a lot of good writings, good conversation starters, great perspective. Follow us on Twitter at Vocal Report, Facebook.com/The Vocal Minority Report. Make sure you go to iTunes, subscribe there. Most importantly, leave a 5-star rating, leave a review. Let other people know that you enjoy the show. Make sure you tell folks so we can continue to grow this show, this form of independent media. Look out for our next episode here where we get into the Dallas murders of the police officers, and we'll get into the shootings of Alton Sterling, Philando Castile, and so many others, unfortunately, by law enforcement officers. Thanks.
If you feel it, will you ball with me? Lay it down, I'm a crew for life. You don't wanna fuck with me.